was over 20 years ago when I had been hearing a lot about this guy named Deepak Chopra. There was actually a time before he was super famous, if you can believe it. And he was talking about some of my work, people were telling me. And then we got on a panel. I'm not sure when or where that was. It was Boston.
To Lancaster, yeah, Boston.
It was something with the university, and then there was a round table afterwards, and I was like, Deepak's my guru, at least my original guru. And I'm like, Deepak, I've invented this really important peptide sequence, which I've deduced from a computer-assisted database search from the sequences of the AIDS virus. And we know this will make an effective vaccine. This will be a therapeutic that could cure, because it'll block the receptors and stop the virus from getting into cells. But, what's going on? I'm trying, and I can't seem to get anything going. Deepak, what am I doing wrong? He said, you're trying too hard. That was a big shock, because where I come from, which is New York, you're supposed to try as hard as you can all the time. But then I see it's a tendency we all have, and I'm sharing this because at lunch you framed it another way that I thought was even better, because I always need that lesson, that same lesson again and again. And now you're saying things happen by themselves. Things happen by themselves. The most important thing that Deepak did for me back then, I think it was 1990, he invited me to Lancaster, where I had the Elizabeth Taylor room. People were kind, people catered to me, and I learned to meditate. I'm probably the only person in the world who learned to meditate to improve their work. But basically, things did start to happen for me, and then I was able to lecture frequently for Deepak and David Simon, the late, great David Simon, to his consciousness, wherever it is right now. And we had some good times. But what I think I wanted to say about that was that, well, I used to be I've been a professional keynote speaker for many years. And the last 4 years, I've basically been working in developing peptide therapeutics into drugs. And I haven't been out there on the circuit at all, so I'm back, and I decided not to do 100 slides, and I'm going to try to make a short presentation to help the timing of the whole thing. But I want to explain what we're talking about when we're talking about receptors. No drug acts. I'm a pharmacologist. I'm a Johns Hopkins pharmacologist. I'm not a mystic. I try to look like a mystic when I can. My PhD is from the oldest pharmacology department in the United States. And pharmacology is the fusion of anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, and chemistry. So all exciting work happens at the interdisciplinary edges. So let me say first that this is what's so exciting. This conference has blown my mind. I've probably been to 1,000 conferences, and I would like to express my gratitude to Deepak for bringing us together, and not just to the incredible speakers, but the incredible people sitting next to you. And you should all applaud yourself and look at Deepak and look at the people sitting next to you. And meet them, say hello. Come on, this is Sunday morning. You could be in church or whatever. And not the scientists, God forbid, not the physicists. They don't have to come. But the point is, that the energy is flowing here. I've never seen anything like it in my entire life, and it's inspiring and exciting and wonderful. So back in the way this all started, Deepak talked about the opiate receptor. It was, in pharmacology, no drug acts unless it's fixed. And up until 72 or 3, when I was a graduate student, they were hypothetical parts of the tissue. Now we can write the complete molecular sequences of them. And the idea is, we were able to create radio-labeled opiates and demonstrate that they bound to the receptor. And, they come on, they come off. Back then, we kind of thought of them as locks and keys, little holes into a bowling ball. But we know more now. Stuart, not just those microtubules vibrate. Guess what? Everything's vibrating in your body-mind. And through my work, everything came through my work, I developed a theory of emotions. And the theory was first published in the Journal of Immunology in 1985. And the title, in the journal, they're very fussy there, the title of the piece was Neuropeptides and Their Receptors, a Psychosomatic Network. Because it turns out that opiates, and back then we didn't know about the brain's own morphine, the endorphins, which turned out to be peptides. And once they turned out to be peptides, then I became very much a peptide expert. But back then, we didn't realize that it's throughout the body-mind. It's what psychoneuroimmunology is all about, and the birth of psychoneuroimmunology, which my partner Mike Ruff and I kind of were the founding scientists in the field and had the first stuff in the real refereed scientific literature about it. What it's about is that the brain, glands, and immune system, they all have the same molecules, which I later called the molecules of emotion and wrote the popular book that Deepak so kindly wrote the preface to. He not only wrote the preface, he actually, I don't know if you remember that, he wrote down the name of his agent and helped me get it published. That was in like 96. I owe a lot to Deepak, and I think about that all the time. And he's a genius. In case he's a dope, right? I mean, did you see such a dumb guy?
Give the lecture.
What?
Give the lecture.
All right, give the lecture. He's not used to being praised. All right, give the lecture. Okay, so I do disagree with some of the things you say lately. You're starting to talk about how mind is produced by the brain. And that just seems like such a male, hierarchical, top-down, non-networky, non-reality-based, scientifically inaccurate way to think about the body-mind. No hyphen, body-mind. It's one vibrating mass. I mean, your body doesn't exist just to carry your head around. Okay, so all of these molecules of emotion, you have opiates flowing in your brain, you have them flowing in the vas deferens, probably flowing at the same moment, and it's been proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that opiates are related to bliss and the kind of bonding that's really not the mere sexual orgasm type bonding, which is part of it, but mother-child bliss, sibling separation. This is the way little chicks will tweet when they are separated from their mother. Jack Panksepp, P-A-N-S-E-P-P, did a whole lot of work on that. They are the bonding throughout the mammalian kingdom. So the theory that these chemicals were actually the molecules of emotion was based on the fact that they're preserved in evolution. They're very similar peptides. Starting from the simplest creatures, they go all the way up with slight differences in the sequences. When I was mapping the brains, I found them in the parts of the brain that had been previously implicated in emotional behavior, because I started out as a neuroscientist before I found, as Deepak jokes around, that, neuroscientists very few of them are interested in consciousness at all. It's too scary, and consciousness is not considered scientific enough to get a handle on it. And one of the young women that I talked to today said, this consciousness thing, I really don't understand it. It seems to be getting more and more complicated. And I said, that's because your mother, Nancy Abrams, has been the only woman so far who's spoken. A little nervous laughter. The point is that you've got to, it's a very holistic view of the body, it's the scientifically accurate view of the body, to think of emotions as the bridge between mind and matter. Yes, emotions are these physical molecules that I've been studying and sequencing and mapping their distribution for, 30 years. But they're also a vibration. They're also an energy. They happen simultaneously all over your body. Let's do a demonstration to take 2 seconds to wake everybody up. Okay, what I want you to do, I want everybody to bang their foot on the floor and be mad. I mean, just one foot, and just look at that foot. And that foot is your boss, that job you didn't get, somebody you screwed you, that girlfriend you just broke up. Come on. Come on, look at your foot. Don't look at me. Look at that foot. This is important. Look at it. Damn that foot. Damn that foot. Damn that. I'm angry. I'm pissed. I'm pissed. I'm pissed. Now I want you to take your hand and kind of stroke yourself on your thigh and say, oh, I'm remembering, oh, that puppy I stroked, my baby. I love myself. Okay, now this crowd is kind of wanting to take notes instead. And I moved out of the lights. But let's pretend you go back and forth. Let's try it. Pound that foot. Pound that foot. Now do a little love. Do a little love. Now pound that foot. Do a little love. Okay, let's go. Do them both at once. Come on. Up. You can't, can you? It's a certain, what's the name of that switch in electronics that's only on or off and doesn't have a rheostat on it? Somebody told me last night. Gino told me last night. Yes, there's often one predominantly emotional state because, yes, they're chemicals, but emotions are effectors to take the thought, to take the consciousness, and to change the body physically. As they act on their receptors all over the body-mind, there are shifts. Certain parts of the body can expand, others can shrink, okay? Now, all this started with drugs. No drug acts unless it has a receptor. No drug acts unless it has a receptor. And it turns out no drug acts unless it's mimicking an internal substance that already binds to that receptor. The endorphins bind to the receptors that, heroin and morphine and oxycodone and Vicodin and all these other things bind to. Same thing. And so it goes for everything. So your own internal juices, which are already there, are being picked up by the outside world. Everybody knows that already. That's basically in the popular culture. But it's very important to see emotions. They actually move things. They move things in your body. So I want to say that I think the psychopharmacologists were actually the first to have a scientific study of consciousness. Way back, like in the 70s, the rat could tell you if it was experiencing an altered state of consciousness or not. This was very important in pharmaceutical development. Was a drug Valium-like? If so, it would bind to the Valium receptor. And if it bound to the Valium receptor and did the same thing as Valium, but it wasn't Valium, maybe it was Librium, then you could get a patent on it and be a different drug company, and you could sell that. So the way you screen the animals, you train them up to press a lever if they recognized it as Valium. And the rats and monkeys, they could tell you exactly what was Valium like, what state of consciousness they were experiencing. So the word consciousness was all over the neuropharmacological literature as early as the 70s when these tests were developed, and Don Overton was a pioneer. And basically what all of this proved is that just like rats have different altered states of consciousness triggered by drugs, emotions do the same thing. Emotions trigger altered states of consciousness, each with different behaviors. They're body-mind wide, each with different behaviors, different memories, and different body postures. I do a lot of work on my heart. Open that heart chakra. Now, chakras, Pooh-pooh, say some of the scientists. Hey, let's not mock something that's been around for 5,000 years and actually coincides perfectly with areas of neuropeptide enrichment. Pretty surprising. The heart has every neurotransmitter and every receptor that we have in the brain. So we must not be obsessed with everything from the neck up, with the necktie that cuts off the sensations from the body, unless we get into our body and learn to feel those sensations in the heart. And the breathing center of your brain, every neuropeptide is there, every neuropeptide receptor. The yogis taught different ways to breathe, to induce different states of consciousness. We can do that ourselves, or we can just do our natural hysterical panting breathing as we run frantically from one thing to the other and look at our text messages. You can make a conscious choice. I choose to experience the pleasures of organization and tranquility in all areas of my life and to know it. That's an affirmation that was given to me. Affirmations are words. They come up from your left frontal cortex. It's very high up. Ultimately, that can permeate every level of your subconscious mind. And by subconscious mind, I don't mean the back of your brain. By subconscious mind, your body is your subconscious mind. Yes, Freud was a cocaine addict and a genius. And everything he said was right, and we should take him seriously. But don't do psychotherapy. It takes too long, and there's so much better techniques today. Well, I wanted to really show you about a peptide a little bit. Yes, these molecules are real. And yes, they move and they vibrate. And peptides are short strings of amino acids. And they, just like you see all these different colors, there's about 20 amino acids that are strung together just like beads on a string. That's the sequence. And every one of those amino acids can rotate around that bond. But, I mean, just like this isn't really a peptide, it's a necklace, well, the sequence of a peptide isn't really a peptide either. In real life, the peptide is vibrating, and even extremely short peptides, even pentapeptides, 5 amino acids long, are able to have a conformation, a preferred shape, a preferred energetic that makes them favor a conformation, but they're always moving. And receptors too, they're moving. They're constantly vibrating at high rates, and this is very important. This is the link where our body links into the cosmic consciousness issues that we've been addressing that are so fascinating to me when I'm not wearing my scientist hat. But I just wanted to mention that we have one of the peptides are great drugs because they're natural. Your body's natural substances, they're much less likely to be toxic. Each amino acid, they can be broken at different places, and the body will digest them up very, very quickly. And it doesn't need special enzymes. There's enzymes to make them digest quickly everywhere. But for years I've worked on and solved this issue. For drugs, you want drugs that are orally active. And so there's some little ways to trickily do that. So I did mention the AIDS vaccine, and I'm not going to talk much about it, but I would like to say that it was called originally Peptide T, and it's only 8 amino acids long. And we know now something we don't know now, didn't know then. This is about 80 amino acids, my necklace. And the peptides, which are 80 amino acids long, are called chemokines, chemokines. And chemokines are, in the beginning, everybody only thought of them in the context of being peptides that make immune cells move from one place to the other. They move out of the bone marrow into your bloodstream and then migrate to the site of infection or inflammation where they're needed. That's what chemokines do. They were dull. They were a backwater. Then in 1995, a group of AIDS virologists discovered that that's the receptor that HIV uses to enter and infect brain, the chemokine receptors. Suddenly, boom, there was lots of funding and explosion, and we predicted it. They turn out to be critical in neurodevelopment, these chemokines and chemokine receptors. There's many of them. It's quite a complex cosmology. But I think one of the things that have really give me a lot of serious thought, let's be very serious about this, is the fact that there's certain diseases that are increasing exponentially, and there's a lot of denial on the part of mainstream medicine that these diseases are exponentially increasing. They have stories like, no, there's no increase in Alzheimer's. People are just living longer. Go to my great-great-great-great-grandparents' graves in Connecticut. People are not, some people were living very, very long lives. That's a very debatable point. But I don't want to get into that debate. Autism is another. Increasing, I mean, right when it was first described by Kanner in 1945, it was so rare he had to scrape together to get 10 patients, 20 patients in the original report, somewhere between 10 and 20. Now, in California, 1 boy in every 50 boys born are diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Oh yes, it's a spectrum, and now we're diagnosing it better, but I don't think so. Everything points to environmental toxins and microbes as well. You can also put the two of them together. Sometimes vaccines have both, which is, of course, a potentially dangerous combination, although if you read some of the NIH mainstream scientific literature, it looks like that whole debate's been put to bed. But I can assure you it hasn't. There are many non-scientists called mothers who are closely observing the autistic children. And by the way, mothers discovered Lyme tick disease. They figured out what caused it. So, you know, there's a lot going on. But the point that I want to make, it can be multifactorial. But here's the key that holds it all together, and here's the solution to the mind-body problem. And this is new. This blew me away. And it's not in Molecules of Emotion. It's in my new book, which I foolishly titled Everything You Need to Know to Feel Good, with parentheses around the second O. So it could get it, God, good, which, you know, in the UK edition, they slashed that right out. They said, you can't sell a book here that has the word God in the title. I don't know why that is. But the point is that here's the key paradigm-breaking discovery that is still not widely accepted. It's not in when we talked in the early days about PNI, we talked about how all these chemicals were in a network of communication with the whole body, throughout the whole body, and every single cell has receptors for all of these many, many peptides. And I used to say, don't call it psychoneuroimmunology, call it psychoimmunoendocrino, gastro, lipo, ... ology. Let's just call it biology. A huge amount of our DNA codes for these cell surface receptors and these communication molecules that keep the whole thing buzzing. Now, catch this. The brain is not separate. The immunologists, they always like to talk about the immune system as a little separate place, but I was very fortunate to have a wonderful long-term collaboration with Dr. Michael Ruff, an immunologist, and that has provided a really rich source of a new way of thinking about disease. And it seems like neuroinflammation is at the root of Alzheimer's disease, autism, schizophrenia. I mean, there's a ton of literature on this. And it turns out that short peptides that are analogs of the virus, of the viral envelope, Let's pretend this is the AIDS viral envelope. It's really about, it would really be a necklace with 600 beads on it. But the problem is, how do you figure out which piece is the real piece? So we figured out the active piece. It's actually only 5 amino acids long, yet it comes in many sequences. It comes in numerous sequences. It's not the sequence, it's the shape. And when you make just that simple peptide and modify it to resist enzyme degradation, you have orally acting drugs. We have a drug right now that treats neuropathic pain. So far, it treats it only in rats, but we're having discussions with 3 different big pharma to put it into humans to test it. Now, here's the key discovery. I didn't make it. A lot of what I'm talking about is work up to this point of my lab and my friends' labs, but her name is Eva Mazey, M-E-Z-E-Y. She's at the NIH. Gradually, her lab's been gotten smaller and smaller because she radically figured out that, well, first let me say, we talk so much about neurons. Do you realize that only 1/10 of the cells in your brain are neurons? 90% of them are glial cells. And there's a huge, it used to just be thought it was the glue that held it all together. But no, it turns out that the glial cells, they have electrical activity. It's all going on. Now, here's the kicker. Nobody would dispute the fact that all glial cells start life in your bone marrow. They move out. When they're in your blood, they're called monocytes, which are cells of the immune system. Then they enter and infect the brain. And I said enter and infect. Sorry, I'm coming from my AIDS world. Yes, these monocytes, as they go into the brain to become glial cells, they can carry things in. They can carry in environmental toxins. They can carry in microbes. That's what we're facing. So it's so weird because in ancient Chinese medicine, the bones were considered the source of everything. And here, the modern science is teaching us that neurons, that probably T cells become neurons in the brain. And the science, it's hardcore. We're not talking just rats here. And she's published a whole series of papers and answered every criticism. The key criticism is, well, your trace is leaking out. She basically takes stem cells from one rodent and sticks it into the other, and you can see them become neurons. Well, everybody says, well, maybe the label leached out and moved somewhere else. Guess how she got around it? She used only female mice as the recipients and male mice as the donors. And nobody can argue with tracking a Y chromosome. There's ways to do it. There's no trivial explanation around this. And by the way, I heard through the grapevine from a friend of mine that was on a high NIH committee where they looked at, they were interested in autoimmune disease. And they found that any woman, any mother who had ever carried past 2nd trimester or given birth to a son, you could find Y chromosome-laden cells in her body. I mean, in a lot of places in the body, not floating just through the bloodstream. So this is like very real. And, you know, it's, you know, I go back to, I hear Deepak's voice, and I know he doesn't want me to, I have to give him a lot of credit for the consciousness raising to interpret my basic biology as far as you can take it. But he always talked about how every cell in your body, every single cell, including the bone cells, they're replaced in a matter of weeks. Weeks. It's a field of information and energy. It's constantly moving. It's able to come from your bone marrow, become neurons. Since you all sat down here, you probably made hundreds of neurons. And what Eva showed at the end, she did a difficult study. She actually took human women, human females, from age 5 to age 70 that had died of various types of, you know, of Hodgkin's lymphoma, and they had had lots of irradiation, and you know, and then they died. And in the attempt to save them, you know, they irradiate and then they transplant. And she, a priori, looked only at the male transplants, females who had received a male transplant. She had about 25 of them, and in every single one of them, she could find male neurons. not just in a few places, but all over the brain. So that's huge because, you know, since the original neuroanatomists, they've known for more than a century tracking. It's easy. You stimulate the brain, the foot goes up. That's the foot center of the motor cortex. But the sensory neurons, we know they go into the back, which, by the way, has every molecule of motion, every neuropeptide receptor is there, filtering through our emotional experience what we perceive at any given moment. It's not seeing is believing. Everybody here sees something different. Everything we see is filtered through our own emotional gradient, and that's scientifically proven. So I think that's all I want to say. I would like to close with something that really happened that blew my mind. And there's all these, you know, I'm not into the proof of God. That's an epiphenomenon. I mean, God is the mystery, okay? And there can be some mysteries, but this is kind of like the Old Testament, and the New Testament is this everything you need to feel good, which has a lot of quantum stories and references to energy through my personal account of a year in my life as I'm hoping to make the breakthrough for our AIDS vaccine. By the way, every vaccine that ever worked in the history of the world works when you can make antibodies against that tiny little part that fits in the receptor. And every virus enters and infects cells through a receptor. Not special virus receptors, but your own endogenous receptors. They jump onto other receptors that are already there, just like the HIV. So we're very excited about our AIDS vaccine research. We're focused on it. We have it. We're collaborating with the NIH. They gave us the rabbits, and we're expecting to be able to take our AIDS vaccine into trials. This is why I haven't been able to be on the lecture circuit. But this is the last thing. I just wanted to mention Synchrodestiny. Someone who I won't mention has written a book entitled Synchrodestiny. Synchrodestiny is beyond synchronicity. Synchrodestiny is when you take these billion-to-one coincidences and roll with them. There really is no scientific explanation, unless one of you quantum physicist guys can hopefully figure it out, for these billion-to-one things that happen in sequence, one right after the other. So I wanted to close by reading, this is the real truth, the God's honest truth. My friend Nancy and I, who were writing the book, and she was in the book, we were sitting in an airport having lunch, just grabbing something before the plane left in Monterey, California, and we're saying, hey, what should the final paragraphs of the book be about? I turned around and saw Deepak Chopra walking toward our booth on his way out of the restaurant, accompanied by his wife, Rita. Candace, he spoke my name as I spoke his, both in mutual surprise and full synchronistic delight. We embraced warmly, then made effusive, genuine, and speedy greetings and introductions all around. But I didn't get any of the details. He talked about he was headed to New York to open his new spa, but I didn't get any of the details. I was too blown away that Deepak had magically arrived at our table at the very moment the end of my second book was being written, a stunning synchronicity and symmetry, like bookends to a past and nascent reality. Deepak had not only been my first mentor in consciousness creates reality, but had generously graced my first book with a foreword presenting my scientific work, which had helped me get it published. For him to come up as I was wrapping up the current book and breaking through on peptide T and coming into my power as a manifestor, that's another topic. We're not going to talk about that at this conference. Just the manifestation of good health. That was pretty amazing. And then we rushed back to Washington. And thank you very much for your attention, and thank you.
So, Candace, thank you. Thank you. Couple of observations. She has a non-linear mind, as you can see. And
even less linear without slides.
Yeah, but that's the source of her creativity. And I just want to thank Candace for giving new meaning to expressions like, I have a gut feeling, my heart is heavy with sadness, or it's in love, or I'm bursting with joy. I think these are metaphors we used to think, but they're actually bodily states, and they have a very scientific basis now. We have a basis to use these expressions, so thank you.
Thank you very much.